Every time you announce your dreams on social media, you're trading real wealth for cheap attention. Every time you post about your goals, you're selling your future for worthless likes. Every time you share your ambitions, you're exchanging potential millions for temporary validation from people who won't even remember your post tomorrow. But you keep doing it, don't you? You keep broadcasting your plans, sharing your strategies, announcing your moves. And then you wonder why you're still stuck while the truly wealthy seem to appear out of nowhere with their success. Here's the truth you don't want to hear: addiction to being seen is exactly what's keeping you from being rich. Money never sleeps, but excuses do. That single line was scrawled on a piece of paper taped to the wall of a small apartment. The person who wrote it had just lost everything: their savings, their business, their relationships. But instead of sharing their story on social media, instead of complaining to friends, instead of seeking sympathy, they made a decision that would change everything. They chose silence. They understood something that most people never grasp. Your struggles are not entertainment for others. Your journey is not a social media story. Your transformation is not a public event. Look around you right now. How many people do you see broadcasting their dreams, announcing their goals, sharing every small victory and setback? Now ask yourself, how many truly wealthy people do you see doing the same? The truth is hard to hear, but it needs to be said. The more you talk about what you're going to do, the less likely you are to actually do it. Every time you share your dreams, you're trading real achievement for temporary attention. Every time you seek validation for your goals, you're weakening your own resolve. I think about the last time you shared a big goal with someone. What was their reaction? Did they truly support you, or did they offer what they called realistic advice? Did they remind you of all the potential problems? Did they tell you about someone else who tried and failed? Here's what nobody tells you about wealth creation. The road to riches is a lonely one. Not because you have to leave people behind, but because you have to leave behind the need for their approval. Most people live their entire lives seeking validation from others. They make decisions based on what their friends will think. They choose careers based on what their family will approve of. They set goals based on what society considers acceptable. And that's exactly why most people will never be wealthy. True wealth creation requires something that most people aren't willing to give. It requires you to become comfortable with silence. It requires you to be okay with people not knowing your next move. It requires you to find satisfaction in progress, not praise. Wealthy understands something crucial. Every time you announce your plans, you give power to the doubters. Every time you seek approval, you invite criticism. Every time you share your strategy, you create competitors. But there's something even more important at play here. When you constantly talk about your goals, you're treating success like it's a social event rather than a personal transformation. Have you ever noticed how the people who talk the most about getting rich are usually the ones furthest from achieving it? Have you ever noticed how those who constantly post about their hustle are often the ones making the least progress? This isn't coincidence. This is human nature at work. When you talk about your goals, your brain gets a small reward, a hit of dopamine from the attention and validation. This creates a dangerous cycle. Instead of working toward your goals, you become addicted to talking about them. You start mistaking discussion for action, planning for progress. But the wealthy, they operate differently. They understand that true power lies in silence, not in being secretive or deceptive, but in being focused. They know that energy spent explaining your moves is energy not spent making them. Think about a lion hunting its prey. Does it announce its presence? Does it seek validation from other animals about its hunting strategy? Does it stop mid-hunt to update its status? No, it moves in silence. It stays focused on its goal. It conserves its energy for what matters. This is the first principle of getting rich. Learn to operate in silence. This doesn't mean you can't have mentors. It doesn't mean you can't have trusted advisors, but it does mean you need to be selective about who you share your journey with. The masses don't understand this. They've been conditioned to believe that success requires constant networking, endless self-promotion, continuous social media presence. They've been taught that if you're not visible, you're not successful. But look at the truly wealthy, not the influencers posting about wealth, but the people actually building it. What do you notice about their behavior? They're not the ones posting daily motivational quotes. They're not the ones sharing every business move. They're not the ones seeking constant validation. They're the ones quietly building, silently growing, consistently progressing. This brings us to an uncomfortable truth. Your desire to share your journey might be the very thing holding you back from completing it. When you constantly seek validation, you're operating from a position of weakness. When you regularly announce your moves, you're working from a place of insecurity. When you feel the need to prove yourself to others, you're actually proving your own lack of confidence. The wealthy understand that true confidence doesn't need constant external validation. Real power doesn't require regular recognition. Genuine progress doesn't demand public approval. But here's where it gets interesting. And this is something most people never realize. The silence I'm talking about isn't just about not sharing your plans. It's about developing an internal locus of control so powerful that external opinions become irrelevant. Think about this. When was the last time you made a major decision without consulting anyone? When was the last time you trusted your own judgment completely? When was the last time you moved forward with a plan despite everyone telling you it wouldn't work? For most people, the answer is never. And that's precisely why most people will never be wealthy. Because wealth creation isn't just about making money. It's about developing the kind of internal strength that makes you immune to other people's opinions. It's about building the kind of confidence that doesn't need constant reinforcement. Let me share something that might shock you. The most dangerous person in your life right now isn't your competition. It's not the economy. It's not the market. The most dangerous person in your life is the one who's always ready with advice about your money. You know who I'm talking about? The friend who's never started a business but has endless opinions about how you should run yours. The relative who's living paycheck to paycheck but wants to warn you about investment risks. The coworker who's never made a successful trade but wants to tell you what stocks to buy. These people aren't just harmless advisors. They're dream killers. Not because they mean to be, but because they're projecting their own fears, their own limitations, their own failed relationships with money onto you. Here's a brutal truth. Most people, are financially illiterate. They don't understand money. They don't understand wealth creation. They don't understand investment. But that doesn't stop them from having opinions about your financial decisions. Would you take swimming lessons from someone who's never been in the water? Would you take flying lessons from someone who's never left the ground? Would you take health advice from someone who's never exercised? Then why are you taking financial advice from people who've never created wealth? This brings us to the second principle of getting rich. Your financial journey must be a private one. Not because you're doing anything wrong, not because you have something to hide, but because the moment you start sharing your financial moves, you invite the kind of advice that can only come from people who haven't done what you're trying to do. The wealthy understand this at a deep level. That's why they discuss money differently. Have you ever noticed how rarely truly wealthy people talk about their investments in detail? Have you ever noticed how they deflect questions about their wealth with general statements? They're not being secretive. They're being smart. They understand that their financial strategies aren't meant for public consumption. They know that their methods taken out of context could be misunderstood or misapplied. There's something even more important at play here. You keep your financial moves private. You protect yourself from one of the most dangerous forces in wealth creation, collective fear. Think about what happens when the stock market dips. What do most people do? They panic, they sell, they make emotional decisions based on collective fear. But what do the wealthy do? They buy, they expand. They make strategic decisions based on private knowledge. The difference isn't just in their bank accounts, it's in their approach to information sharing. Most people feel compelled to discuss every financial decision, every investment move, every business strategy with their social circle. They think they're gathering wisdom, but what they're really gathering is fear. They think they're being prudent, but what they're really being is paralyzed. The wealthy operate differently. They understand that every person they tell about their financial moves is a potential source of doubt, fear, or misguided advice. They know that the masses are programmed for scarcity, trained for mediocrity, conditioned. This isn't about being antisocial. This isn't about distrusting everyone. This is about understanding a fundamental truth. Your wealth creation journey is uniquely yours. No one else needs to understand it. No one else needs to approve of it. No one else needs to validate it. Think about the most successful business moves you've ever made, the best investments you've ever chosen, the smartest financial decisions you've ever taken. How many of them came from following the crowd? How many came from collective wisdom? How many came from social consensus? I'm willing to bet the answer is none. Because true wealth creation doesn't happen in the open. It happens in silence. It happens in solitude. It happens in those moments when you're willing to trust your own judgment more than the opinions of others. But here's where most people get stuck. They've been conditioned to believe that success requires consensus. They've been taught that if enough people agree with their decision, it must be right. They've been programmed to seek approval before action. This is why most people will never be wealthy. They're playing a game that can't be won, trying to get rich while keeping everyone happy, trying to build wealth while maintaining universal approval, trying to succeed while satisfying every opinion. The more they understand something profound, the more people who agree with your financial decisions, the less likely those decisions are to be profitable. The more popular investment strategy, the less likely it is to yield exceptional returns. The more people who validate your business move, the less innovative it probably is. Think about this. Every major innovation, every groundbreaking company, every revolutionary product was initially met with skepticism, doubt, and disapproval. Every significant wealth creation opportunity looks like a mistake to the masses until it succeeds. This brings us to another crucial understanding. The opinions that matter least are often the ones most. Have you ever noticed how the people with the strongest opinions about your financial decisions are often the ones with the least financial success? Have you ever noticed how the loudest critics are usually the ones with the smallest achievements? This isn't coincidence. This is human nature at work. People who haven't achieved what you're trying to achieve will always have opinions about your methods. People who haven't built what you're trying to build will always have criticisms about your approach. People who haven't reached where you're trying to go will always have doubts about your direction. But here's the key. Their opinions are irrelevant. Their criticisms are meaningless. Their doubts are insignificant because they're not playing the same game you are. They're not building what you're building. They're not seeing what you're seeing. This is why silence is so powerful. When you operate in silence, you're not just avoiding negative input. You're creating space for clear thinking. You're not just dodging criticism. You're building mental strength. You're not just evading doubters. You're developing unshakable confidence. I think about the most successful people, personally, not the ones you follow on social media, not the ones you read about in magazines, but the ones you actually know. How much do they share about their financial moves? How often do they seek approval for their business decisions? How frequently do they post about their wealth creation journey? The answer almost invariably is very little, because they understand that true power lies not in sharing, but in doing, not in telling, but in building, not in seeking approval, but in creating value. You know what's fascinating about human behavior? We'll spend hours scrolling through social media, looking at other people's success stories, but we won't spend 10 minutes examining our own financial habits. We'll invest countless hours discussing other people's business strategies, but we won't invest a single hour developing our own. This addiction to external focus is killing your wealth potential. Every minute you spend analyzing someone else's journey is a minute not spent creating your own. Every hour you waste discussing other people's strategies is an hour not invested in developing your own. Every day you lose following someone else's path is a day not spent carving your own. But here's what's really interesting, and this is something most people never realize. The wealthy aren't just quiet about their own moves. They're quiet about everyone else's too. Think about this. When was the last time you heard a truly wealthy person gossiping about other people's business decisions? When was the last time you saw a genuinely successful person commenting on someone else's financial choices? When was the last time you witnessed a real wealth creator spending time analyzing other people's mistakes? It doesn't happen. Because the wealthy understand something crucial. Other people's journeys are irrelevant to your own success. This brings us to the third principle of getting rich. Focus exclusively on your own game. Most people spend their lives playing audience to other people's games. They watch from the sidelines. They comment from the bleachers. They criticize from the comfort of their own mediocrity. But the wealthy, they're too busy playing their own game to watch anyone else's. This isn't about ignorance. This isn't about isolation. This is about focus. Pure, undiluted, powerful focus. Think about this. Every opinion you have about someone else's business is energy not invested in your own. Every judgment you make about someone else's financial decisions is mental capacity not used for your own growth. Every minute you spend analyzing someone else's mistakes is time not spent learning from your own. The wealthy understand this at a fundamental level. They know that mental bandwidth is finite. They understand that focus is a limited resource. They recognize that attention, once divided, loses its power. But here's where it gets really interesting. The less you focus on others, the more clearly you can see your own path. When you stop comparing your journey to others, you start seeing opportunities they don't see. When you stop analyzing their strategies, you start developing better ones of your own. When you stop following their paths, you start discovering shortcuts they never found. This is why the wealthy seem to see opportunities that others miss. It's not because they're smarter. It's not because they're luckier. It's because they're focused exclusively on their own game. Think about a chess master in the middle of a crucial match. Do they care about other games being played in the room? Do they pay attention to the spectators' opinions? Do they waste mental energy analyzing other players' strategies? No, they focus entirely on their own game. They concentrate completely on their own moves. They invest all their mental energy in their own strategy. This is how the wealthy operate. They play their own game with complete focus, absolute concentration, and unwavering attention. But here's the part that most people miss. This level of focus requires sacrifice. It requires you to give up things that most people consider normal, natural, even necessary. You must give up the need to know what others are doing. You must give up the desire to comment on others' choices. You must give up the habit of comparing your journey to theirs. This is why getting rich requires silence. Not just silence about your own moves, but silence about everyone else's too. Think about how much mental energy you currently spend on other people's financial journeys. How much time do you waste discussing other people's business decisions? How much attention do you give to analyzing other people's strategies? Now imagine channeling all that energy into your own growth. Imagine investing all that time in your own development. Imagine focusing all that attention on your own opportunities. The difference would be transformative. But here's the challenge. Society has programmed us to be observers rather than players. We've been conditioned to comment rather than create. We've been trained to analyze rather than act. Breaking free from this programming requires something that most people aren't willing to give. It requires you to become comfortable with being misunderstood. When you stop participating in a collective commentary, people will notice. When you stop engaging in financial gossip, people will wonder. When you stop sharing opinions about others' choices, people will question. Let them. Because here's another truth about wealth creation. The moment you become comfortable with being misunderstood is the moment you start making moves that others can't understand. Think about this. Every major wealth creation opportunity looks strange to the masses. Every significant business innovation seems weird to the majority. Every powerful investment strategy appears odd to the average person. This is why the wealthy don't seek to be understood. They don't try to explain their moves. They don't attempt to justify their strategies. They understand that the kind of moves that create real wealth will always seem strange to those who haven't made them. The kind of strategies that generate true riches will always appear odd to those who haven't used them. The kind of decisions that build lasting fortunes will always look weird to those who haven't made them. This brings us to another crucial understanding. The need to be understood is often the biggest obstacle to doing what needs to be done. How many opportunities have you missed because you couldn't explain them to others? How many moves have you delayed because you couldn't justify them to your social circle? How many decisions have you avoided because you couldn't make them make sense to everyone else? The wealthy don't have this problem. They've learned to operate without the need for external understanding. They've developed the ability to move forward without social validation. They've mastered the art of taking action without public approval. Here's a truth that might make you uncomfortable. Your current financial situation is largely a result of how much attention you pay to other people's opinions. Your present wealth level is directly connected to how much energy you spend seeking validation. Your existing success is precisely limited by how much you care about being understood. Take a moment and think about your last 3 financial decisions. How many of them were influenced by what others might think? How many were shaped by the need for approval? How many were modified to make sense to people who don't share your vision? The wealthy make decisions differently. They don't ask, what will others think? They ask, what will this build? They don't wonder, will this make sense to others? They consider, will this create value? They don't worry, will people understand this? They focus on, will this generate results? This brings us to the 4th principle of getting rich. Action speaks louder than explanation. Most people spend their lives preparing to take action. They plan, they research, they discuss, they analyze, they prepare, but they never actually move. Why? Because they're waiting for something that will never come. Universal approval. They want everyone to agree with their decision before they make it. They want everyone to validate their strategy before they implement it. They want everyone to understand their vision before they pursue it. But here's the brutal truth. This is the kind of moves that create real wealth will never have universal approval. The kind of strategies that generate true riches will never have collective validation. The kind of decisions that build lasting fortunes will never have complete understanding. Let me give you a concrete example. Think about the most successful business in your local area. Now go back to when that business first started. Ask around about what people thought when it opened. You'll almost always find the same story. People thought it would fail. People said it wouldn't work. People questioned the entire concept. But the owner didn't seek approval. They didn't wait for understanding. They didn't need validation. They acted, they moved, they built. Think about this. Every major fortune started with a decision that most people thought was wrong. Every significant wealth creation journey began with a move that most people couldn't understand. Every powerful success story started with an action that most people advised. The wealthy understand this at a bone-deep level. They know that the crowd is almost always wrong about wealth creation. They understand that the majority is almost never right about financial opportunities. They recognize that the masses are almost always mistaken about business strategy. Consider the real estate market. When is the best time to buy? When everyone is selling. When is the best time to sell? When everyone is buying. Yet, how many people have the courage to act against the crowd? How many have the strength to move against the majority? How many have the fortitude to operate against public opinion? This is why silence is so crucial. It's not just about keeping your moves private. It's about maintaining the mental clarity to see opportunities that the crowd misses. It's about preserving the emotional strength to act when others are paralyzed by fear. It's about protecting the intellectual independence to think when others are reacting to panic. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wealthy don't just ignore the crowd. They use the crowd's behavior as a counterindicator. When everyone's buying, they're often selling. When everyone is selling, they're often buying. When everyone is moving in one direction, they're often moving in the opposite. Think about every major market crash. What was the crowd doing right before? Buying frantically. Think about every significant market recovery. What was the crowd doing right before? Selling desperately. But here's the key. The wealthy don't make these moves publicly. They don't announce their positions. They don't broadcast their strategies. They act in silence, move with purpose, and let the results speak for themselves. This is why silence is so crucial to wealth creation. When you're constantly sharing your moves, you're constantly inviting the crowd's influence. When you're regularly announcing your strategies, you're regularly exposing yourself to collective fear. When you're frequently explaining your decisions, you're frequently subjecting yourself to mass doubt. Consider this. Every time you explain your investment strategy to someone, you're not just sharing information, you're inviting doubt. Every time you discuss your business plans with others, you're not just seeking input, you're collecting fears. Every time you announce your financial moves, you're not just being transparent, you're accumulating resistance. Or there's something even more important to play here. When you operate in silence, you develop a kind of mental strength that's impossible to achieve any other way. Think about this. Every time you make a move without seeking validation, you build confidence. Every time you take action without explaining yourself, you develop conviction. Every time you progress without public approval, you strengthen your resolve. This is how the wealthy build their most powerful asset, unshakable self-trust. They don't need others to validate their decisions because they've proven to themselves time and time again that they can trust their own judgment. They don't require external approval because they've demonstrated to themselves repeatedly that they can rely on their own insight. They don't seek public understanding because they've shown themselves consistently that they can depend on their own wisdom. But here's the challenge. Building this level of self-trust requires you to be willing to be wrong, not just wrong in private, but wrong in a way that others might see. And consider the most successful investors you know. How many failed investments did they make before finding their winning strategy? Consider the most profitable businesses you've observed. How many mistakes did they make before finding their successful model? Consider the wealthiest people in your community. How many times did they fail before achieving their breakthrough? Where wealthy understand something profound about that's being wrong is not the opposite of being successful. It's a prerequisite for success. Think about your own relationship with being wrong. How much does the fear of visible failure influence your decisions? How much does the anxiety about public mistakes affect your choices? How much does the worry about others' judgment impact your actions? For most people, the answer is too much. They let the fear of being wrong prevent them from taking the actions that could make them rich. They allow the anxiety about mistakes to stop them from making the moves that could create wealth. They permit the worry about judgment to keep them from implementing the strategies that could generate success. This brings us to another crucial understanding. The more comfortable you become with being wrong, the more likely you are to eventually be right in a way that matters. The wealthy don't just accept this, they embrace it. They don't just acknowledge it, they use it. They don't just understand it, they leverage it. But here's the key. They do all of this in silence. They don't announce their failures. They don't broadcast their mistakes. They don't publish their defeats. They simply learn from them, adjust because of them, and grow through them. This is another reason why silence is so powerful in wealth creation. It gives you the space to be wrong without the added weight of public opinion. It provides you the freedom to fail without the extra burden of social judgment. It offers you the liberty to make mistakes without the additional pressure of collective criticism. Think about this. When you operate in silence, your only critic is yourself. Your only judge is your results. Your only measure is your progress. This is true freedom. This is real power. This is the path to wealth.